I came here 30 years ago. I found immediately a difference. Everybody was talking about theology, but nobody was living together. Whereas in India, everybody was living together, but nobody was talking theology. And that was the contrast immediately I felt. And I was looking for somewhere to engage, somewhere to have discussions, some to get together. It was always a formal occasions. It was not informal. Let me start with my initial reflections. I think Christians began, in my view, began to rethink their relationship with the people of other faiths as early as Edinburgh 1910. If we are studying 100 years ago, so that's the beginning of that part. And the very first decade, we started that process. The Christians started that process. Now, I'm not going to go in details, but I feel that there are two areas which Muslims has found that Second Vatican Council and World Council of Churches initiatives most valuable. The Second Vatican Council's Nostra Aetate document is a very important part. It was taken, as far as Islam was concerned, it was written with care. Much more debate, internal discussions. And I understand sometimes it's even drafted in Arabic probably first, and then to the French, and then to the English. After that the Latin, and then Latin version came the third, Arabic, French, Latin version on the part. But I feel that as far as the Muslims are concerned, there has always been an afterthought. So in relation to Christian-Muslim relations, Jewish experience was always an important and dominant one. The Second Vatican Council was also the same. It was how to relate to Jewish community after the Holocaust. Then it came to thought what the Muslims will say in the Middle East if we give up some sort of statement about the Jewish existence or Jewish experience. So Islam has been a thought, but not an immediate, open, immediate thought. When I talk to Muslim community here and also in other places, I get this response. We will introduce Azharul Haq or Mizanul Haq, these two books, as a syllabus for dialogue. And that is the problem. The future religious scholarship that has been trained and not trained how Christians understand Christianity, but how that particular debate was so important and how Muslims should understand that debate. And that is the challenge for us. However, there was another area that has changed as well. While these things were going on, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was saying we need to understand Christianity as Christian understands them. But unfortunately, the whole events took over by the munazara, the debate, the polemical angles. And Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's whole book about the translation of the Bible, understanding of the New Testament as a Christian understand, were left behind. And the third area here again in this section, I would say there is another dimension which shapes even today's Muslim mind is the Gospel of Barnabas. You see, Rashid Rida started serializing the Gospel of Barnabas in Al-Manar, the journal he produced. That particular version was received in India, translated, and also used in interpretation of the Christian understanding and belief systems. And even today, this polemical debate, the gospel is Barnabas, is the most authentic gospel, in which the Christian has hidden them, and Christians are not, they are unaware of this, etc., etc. This is still going on. So we are trying to have a dialogue in this sort of atmosphere. When Muslims were trying to enter into dialogue with Christians, the first experience that happened was in 1954 in Bahamdoun in Lebanon, where the Muslims and Christians came together, and in that place, in April, what happens is that the Muslims' priority in dialogue was they wanted a partnership with the Western Christians to face a common threat of atheism and also capitalist, materialist world. And Bahamdoun dialogue, as the whole verbatim report is available, Muslims saw the church as an ally in their struggle against materialism and socialism on the one hand, and injustice of any kind, particularly against Palestinians, on the other. They saw the dialogue between the two faith communities as a dialogue of common cause. In Bahamdoun, they participated in both its preparatory meetings and in the convocation. This convocation, as expected, was dominated by the participants' concern about the tightening grip of materialism and growing influence of socialism. So the Muslims' participations, when they entered into dialogue, the immediate concerns were existential realities, not theological. I think here it is, after the colonial experience, what I like to highlight here is that if you see the Muslim scenario, they came out of colonial experience. In the last 200 years, their priority was how to preserve what they have learned. And preservation was the priority. And pass on that preserved knowledge to next generation. And therefore the engagement, the concept of ijtihad, the relations with the others was not a priority. And therefore, when the community grew up, came out of the colonial past, they didn't have the tools to engage with the modern world. That's number one. Number two, even the seminaries, those who trained the future leadership of Muslims, were in problems. Because, I can tell you in the Indian context, but it is more or less the similar situation was in other places. In the syllabus that was prepared to train the future religious leadership were largely prepared for the civil servants. It was not meant for the religious leaderships. So when the Deoband or other schools were established, they adopted Dars-e-Nizami. Mullah Sahaluddin Sahalawi, his syllabus is known as Dars-e-Nizami. His syllabus was prepared for the Mughal and the Mughal civil servants. That civil service code becomes the knowledge, preservation knowledge. The priority there was how you deal with your transaction, family law, other things. So to expect that Al-Ghazali will emerge out of that is very difficult. And the situation was such dire after 1945, 1947, that to engage with the modern world, they didn't have tools. The education systems, the British colonial education system, French education colonial system has changed. One was the modern education, and because these people do not accept this modern education, they should be left alone. As a result, the seminary education was much more inward-looking, whereas the others who went to modern education were unaware of the religious traditions. So when the issue of cloning comes to, one understands what it means, but they don't know what to do with it, how to interpret. The other understands the interpretation, but they do not know what it means. So our situation in this is like that. Something that also changed theory of adjustment on others was the Iranian Revolution. The people who were asking for Islamic Sharia, asking for Islamic law, all of a sudden thought it is possible. Look here, revolution has come, let us start. And after 79, you'll see that whole 1980s was dominated by the issue of minorities, Sharia, etc. Unfortunately, in a number of Muslim countries, Sharia was implemented by the military rulers because they saw their own power is declining. For achieve popularity, Sharia was called, whether in Pakistan, in Sudan, and other places, and this was exploited. And what is Sharia? What the Muslims are still debating, how it should be implemented, as if somebody has a long files of codes and they want to implement that thing. It's not the case. Sharia evolves, works with all those things that you are aware of. But what I'm saying here is that Sharia is also my prayer, my fasting. And in some ways, the military generals has tried to put this agenda as a law, as chopping of hands, flogging, etc., because that was the most demonstrative aspect. But the problem was that it is also about there shouldn't be hungry people, clothing, right to freedom, right to speech. All those things were neglected. And Sharia becomes a huge popular issue for many people. In order to have Sharia or minority or the new law, etc., you need freedom. The Muslim world is not a free world. And to have a freedom to debate these things, you have not only the freedom, but freedom of atmosphere where whatever you say will not be judged as you become apostate. Even I'm talking about Muslims. You see this in Pakistani court. What I understand is that there are more than 500 Muslims in this apostasy or the law that says blasphemy law. And this is also about politics, internal problems and other things. Apostasy is also an issue we need to discuss, and I'll come back to that a little later. I would say that there is an unequal power in our relationship. I was reading one of the recent books. One of the editors, Colin, Muslims are usually in interfaith dialogue are invited. There are very few Muslims who really invite others in international nationally. So once you invite others, you are already in a powerful position. You set the agenda. You tell what to do. It is not a joint thing. I feel this the World Council of Churches did in the 90s and later on. But largely, it is an invitees. Either Muslim invites or other one invites. That's one. I would say that the unequal power is not simply political power, military power. There is another power. In recently published by Colin's introduction highlights the fact that the 11 contributors out of 19, to quote, have doctorate or other postgraduate qualifications in areas related to Islam, and 5 are presently working on doctorate on Islam. Now, how do you measure this? I'm trying to encourage some young people to do Christian Muslim studies, or even understanding Christianity as Christian understands. Learn Latin, Greek, and learn the understanding of others. You can't even count in Britain 5 people or 10 people. It's very difficult. So this is the power relationship. Can we have, and will that be a possibility, that our relationship be on human relationship. Is there a possibility of that? That we are human and the dialogue should be conducted on the basis of just as a human being.